thanks for showing up. I have no idea what you meant. Yeah, I mean, it's half a year we haven't done anything besides doing a conference called Cognitive Cities, which is like our baby that we're very proud of. And we met the LHBS people right after the conference, and it was really like, okay, it's like the same spirit. So and they told us about uncomfortable talks. We're like, yeah, that's perfect. We love that because all our presentations always, everything is cool. Oh, you have to do social media, and there's so much good stuff going on. And now we actually can have like a more like a doomsday talk. But now, actually, it's kind of difficult for us to do an uncomfortable talk because everything that's happening in the world for us is really exciting. You know, there's so much change, but that's a very untypical German thing to be excited about change. Because if we hate one thing, then it's change. So yeah, we try to give it an uncomfortable spin, which basically means if you want to have it be uncomfortable, you should put yourself in the shoes of like 40 years older people or something like that. We'll see. Whatever comes out of it. For us, everything starts with that quote from our favorite author, former science fiction author, now like I think like future present or whatever author, where he had his main character in the book Pattern Recognition give this quote, which basically for us three summed up what our lives are about, or what is really gets us going. So we decided to build a company around that called Third Wave. That's our official mugshots. Yeah, and so we, coming from, I was at Razorfish in Germany before Igor was at Catch and Play, and Peter is doing the Berlin thing for quite some years now, and we just decided... Well, I'm going to pay for that. So what we want to do is, or we are really excited about stuff that's happening, how people's behavior are changing. So social media is a nice thing, but social media is actually like like a symptom of something bigger, of bigger behavior changes, and that's what's got us exciting, and what actually a lot of people have a lot of questions about. So basically, our job is to help people understand what's happening and help, yeah, like we say, create the game plan for all things that are coming up in their communication. So it's a super interesting time, and as our pal Galadriel used to say, the world is changing. Yeah, I can feel it in the air. I can feel it in the water. So a lot of things are changing. And we used to talk about the future all the time, like, oh, this stuff's going to happen, like flying cars and jetpacks and stuff like that, without actually realizing that most of the stuff we dream about actually is here already. Now, just to get us going, I want to read you 2 paragraphs that a guy wrote at the beginning of this year, and looking back on 2010, and try to imagine you're reading a science fiction novel. So he wrote, "The year is 2010. America has been at war for the first decade of the 21st century and is recovering from the largest recession since the Great Depression. Air travel security uses full-body X-rays to detect weapons and bombs. The president, who is African-American, uses a wireless phone which he keeps in his pocket to communicate with his aides and cabinet members from anywhere in the world. This smartphone, called a BlackBerry, allows him to access the World Wide Web at high speed, take pictures and send emails. It's just after Christmas. The average family's wish list includes smartphones like the president's BlackBerries, as well as other items like touchscreen tablet computers, robotic vacuums, and 3D television. Video games can be controlled with nothing but gestures, voice command, and body movement. In the news, a rogue Australian cyber terrorist is wanted by world's largest governments and corporations for leaking secret information over the World Wide Web. Spaceflight has been privatized by 2 major companies, Virgin Galactic and SpaceX, and Time Magazine's Person of the Year and subject of an Oscar-worthy feature film created a network called Facebook, which allows everyone, in this case 500 million people, to share their lives online. So it's really interesting if someone just take facts, like stuff that we're used to every day, and put it into like a context where it's like a description of the future, and I said, yeah, the future is actually here. Unfortunately, that William Gibson quote continues to the just not evenly distributed, and we know the one industry that got disrupted by digital technology very early on, the music industry. And as we all know, or at least we in Germany, and I think you guys too, know that they haven't really coped with what is happening, what is changing. But actually they are by far not the only industry that is struggling with the change. Just a few days ago, the Wall Street Journal posted in a blog post, had this list of the top 10 dying industries. And they just took a look at what's happening. The interesting part is there's only one industry that is really suffering from the current recession, and that's the manufactured home dealers. So that's also a disclaimer, it's a very US-centric view, but I think a lot of it is also relevant over here, like newspaper publishing, yeah, wired telecommunications carriers, record stores, yeah, photo finishing. All these industries are somehow disrupted or actually dying because of technology changes or of actually behavior changes. So, to sum it up, as our good pal Ben Hammersley would say, you can't help but realize that the next 10 to 40 years are going to be really strange. Totally strange. And that rate of strangeness seems is going to get exponentially more strange. So, and that's the stuff that fascinates us and that gets a lot of people really, really uncomfortable. So, we look at all these things that are happening, that are changing. That's part of our job. And for this talk tonight, we want to give you like a quick rundown into three main areas of interest, and just like fire some stuff at you where we see changes happening. So that's gonna go look at what's changing in cities, what's changing in work, what's changing in media, and then we're gonna just to end on the lighter note, gonna give you some ideas of how to cope with that change. It's more like the self-help, inspirational talk at the end. So, how are cities changing?
I will take that. To give you some context, the conference we made, it's about a month ago now. Time is running fast right now, so I'm really not sure what month it is. The conference was the Cognitive Cities Conference, and it was about the future of cities. It's a topic we kind of digged into about 2.5 years. We decided then to start a blog where we started collecting stuff. And a year ago, we kind of figured, well, there's nothing really happening about this topic in Germany, and let's do a conference. So from the idea to the conference, it was kind of a bumpy ride, because in between we started a company, and it kind of gets in between. But the conference was a full success. We had actually it was more successful than we thought. Yeah, so how does this work actually? No?
You've destroyed it. No.
Is that working? We are not good with technology. Or at least I am. So cities.
He's just that good with Macs.
Yeah. I was a Linux user for 7 years, so there's that. That's a picture of actually Houston from the ISS, and people keep telling us that the 100 billion we spent on this thing flying in space were like worthless, but at least we got some really cool pictures out of it. So cities, really difficult topic because cities are encompassing basically everything that we know of. And to give you just some numbers and perspectives, right now we're about 6.5 billion people on the planet, and just over 50% are living in cities. By 2050 we will be, if the rate continues, 9 billion people, and over 70% will be living in cities. And that's, if you take it in perspective, for cities that's a really small time to really figure out how to actually manage all the new people arriving into their urban environment. So the short version of this talk, we are pretty screwed. Because there is, at this rate and at how cities are evolving, we will not manage to bring all the people in and bring them like a good life. But the problem with cities is we kind of think about them in very different fuzzy ways. Like everybody has a different idea of what his dream city is, how it should work, what actually cities do, and especially what we can actually do about cities. We tend to romanticize cities. I do. That's a picture I took on our last trip to New York, and I really want to live there at some point. But the thing is, as much as I romanticize about New York, and it's really great, there are really some downsides to it too. So the problem with cities in general right now, and that's not a developed world situation, it's really worldwide, it's top-down city building. Le Corbusier, that's his vision of Paris. He actually had a plan where he would destroy most parts of the city just to bring up these skyscrapers where people would live in this basically concrete prisons. But that was his vision of how life should work. You have a small compartment where you live, and there are a lot of green spaces around it. And he was really prepared to like destroy parts of Paris just to make that happen. As we know, it didn't, and that's a good thing. So reality in cities looks more like that. More people live in this kind of environment than in New York, Lower East Side kind of thing. That's a picture of Rio de Janeiro, one of the many favelas they have. There is also cities like Lagos, which are in even worse situations, where people really have no access to clean water, no electricity. There's really not much going on, but at the same time, Lagos is really growing at a very fast rate, and people don't know how to actually build around it, because it's still a top-down environment where people decide, well, this kind of people go there, this kind of people go there. There's also Linfeng. What seems like smog, like fog, is actually smog. China has a lot of great cities like Shanghai, but most cities look like that, and that's not really a good environment for people to live in. But this whole situation isn't really only a problem that third world countries have. That's Detroit. Detroit is famous for being a motor city, and that's kind of the problem in the developed world, because we tend to build our cities around industries. And if this industry collapses, that's what's going to happen. Some people say that LA is actually the next problem, because the content industry is kind of in a shaky position, and LA is really structured around that. But people really didn't learn from the fact that top-down situations don't really work. China, for example, proposed, or actually they started building on that, connecting really a couple of cities to one mega city, and they really called it mega city. They're building superb infrastructure there. It will surely help people to cope with some situations, but in the end, it's still a top-down city that will have a lot of problems, because one guy or one team decides how 42 million people should be living in. And that's not really what you want. But that's not only like, this is only a plan, this is reality. New Sangdo in South Korea is just off Seoul. And what they did there is build a city from scratch for 300,000 people in about 7 years. They decided to build a city, just build it up. It has kind of features that you would think of in some sci-fi movies, because Cisco, one of the companies that is involved in this project, implemented an infrastructure where people can actually talk via video conferencing between each other, so you don't have actually to go outside. You can just call your neighbor and you see them. But all this is really an idea of a company from New Jersey who started investing money in there, and they had to deal with the Korean government, and they just went for it, created this park where people should be living in. China has already has this project, or does China? They built also a city from scratch for 1 million people, and surprisingly nobody moved in. 1 million people could live there, just about 10% are actually currently there, and it's around for 3 years. So it seems like they looked at what is worse in American suburbia and just implemented that, because really that worked out well for America. And despite the fact that nobody really moves in, they're still continuing to building the city. Well, one part of what was really a major topic at our conference is that data will actually help us to develop new approaches how to think about cities. How can we make them better, and how can governments make them better? The problem is that nobody is really prepared for that. So there is a small movement. New York just hired Rachel Stern, who is 27, and she is the Chief Digital Officer of New York City. And there was really a big discussion about, is she the right person to actually do that? Because New York is a big city and has a lot of problems and has a big infrastructure, and she seems like a good marketing PR person, but I'm not really sure if she really can tackle all the issues that will approach her, especially not after watching her at South by Southwest. Going back to, like, she told a bit about herself, and one of the things she mentioned, well, I did that, and I was actually an intern in this company. And I'm like, well, if you're the Chief Digital Officer for New York, you shouldn't be reciting your internships in your CV right now. So the problem is, who actually owns our data, and who will own our streets, who will be actually building all the stuff that we want to change about our cities. So this is a screenshot of Google Street View. That's actually in the back our office, behind a tree, but we are moving soon. That's Kreuzberg, Cottbusser Tor. Really good place to get robbed. So my problem is, you probably saw the discussion in Germany about Google Street View arriving. People went berserk about it. And I didn't really understand that, because why wouldn't you want a service that's actually offering you this kind of information? But my problem with Google Street View is a different one. It's about a company commercializing our public space in a way that we cannot control. I'm fine with commercial, like advertising is just fine with me, but we need a set of rules that we can follow, and companies can follow, and we can understand how this exchange is working. Other companies like IBM have huge programs. They call it smarter cities, and they're investing in infrastructure billions. It's not social media like, yeah, we have like spent 100,000 euros on that and that. It's like billions investing in how city infrastructure will change over the course of the next 20 years. And they have this great program, and they're investing in these games, and people start playing with that and leaving all their data, and that's kind of an issue, because Matt Biddulph at our conference told, after he was asked about, because he's working for Nokia, and he showed some stuff they're working on, and somebody asked him, well, what's about the data that you're collecting about us? And his take, and he very much emphasized that it's his personal take and not Nokia's, is that the data should be like money in the bank. You should give it to the bank, and the bank is doing stuff with it, you earn money. The same thing should happen with data, but the problem is, well, we can go to the bank, we can get our account closed, and there is nothing more there. Data isn't that approachable. And the whole problem right now is that we generate a lot of data, and companies use that, and we need really to take up the speed of creating rules to which we can follow, everybody can follow us. And that's kind of the uncomfortable part about this. It's about you. You need to really understand the fact that you need to approach companies, governments, and really start asking questions about how is the data used, how can we change, and how we can participate in creating a better future for our cities.
Yeah, so that's the thing where digital technology actually is used by large companies to like gain more influence in our daily lives. Yeah, and where we are actually challenged to do something about that. But on the other hand, big companies are also very challenged by what technology is doing for them, and that's especially in the workplace. And that's because take the digital technology and everything that's connected to it, like all the communication possibilities, everything that's connected with the social web, is allowing for new ways to actually do work or do collaborate. And that's, just to get us started, that's like a big point is that actually the borders between who's inside the company and who's outside the company are dissolving. Yeah, so that's the model we're used to. Yeah, like every department for themselves, and you do the job you're hired to. Now technology and like Enterprise 2.0 stuff, wikis, allow us to actually dissolve these borders and work more together, which is a good thing on one hand because it allows for more collaboration. But on the other hand, it also like takes away structure, yeah, and like clear control, who's in charge of whom. And it's going to be a lot more interesting if all this crowdsourcing mechanics are going to be a lot more important, where actually we take people from the outside and get them involved in inside processes. It's going to be really interesting because the challenge is there, and actually the companies who are using that technology going to have an advance, and others are forced to follow behind without really wanting to give that control away. But yeah, losing control is a big issue. I mean, all of us who have something to do with social media or consulting clients or our brands who think about how to communicate on the social web, losing control is a big part of it, because all of a sudden the consumer, the customer has a voice, and he's not only talking with us, he's also talking to other customers and consumers. But this whole technology actually allows for a lot of things that have been on our minds for a long time, but haven't been possible. Like there was a whole like telecommuting trend at the beginning of the 90s, or all throughout the 90s, but the technology wasn't there. But all of a sudden it's really possible, also from the type of work we're doing, that it's actually possible to not be present at the company building anymore. So I can go into like co-working spaces, like the Beta House. I can move away from that. I can actually companies are starting to change their presence model. Like there's this movement in the US called results-only work environment, where that two ladies from Best Buy have started, where they have turned the whole headquarters of Best Buy around, where there's no more presence demanded of the employees. It's all that counts are the results that an employee is agreeing upon with his superior. And where they do this and how they do this is actually up to them. And it's really interesting how that changes the whole dynamic of the workplace. Because it's a lot about flexibility. And the interesting part is if you start thinking about flexibility, it's stuff like, okay, I'm not coming in on, I'm coming in on Sunday, but I'm taking off Wednesday. And then you start really getting flexible the minute you understand what you can do with it. Like checking your emails in the morning, getting your kids to school, then going in for a couple of meetings and stuff like that. That's all made possible through technology, but it also means that I cannot just walk through the rooms and see what all my employees are doing. Again, that's something that we really enjoy and we really like from where it's heading, but it's something as a middle management guy who's used to having all his employees under control is really going to be scared of. outsourcing has, thanks to technology, taken up a whole other level. Now it's not only like big companies who outsource certain parts of their work to other countries. I myself, as an individual person, can outsource stuff. There are like services like virtual assistants, yeah, that allow me to have a guy or a woman in India or in South Africa or another country work for me, do research for me on a very affordable rate. Yeah, so actually I can say, okay, tomorrow morning I need to have like 10 cases of how someone's using Twitter in the food space or something like that. And then can send it off to my virtual assistant, and in the morning when I get up I will have a finished PowerPoint presentation in my inbox. That's what they're actually doing. So I'm not getting any affiliate money or stuff like that, and actually not using it. But it's getting really interesting. Or like this other service that's PSD cleanup. You send them your messed up PSD file, and for $8 they will sort it out for you. Like give it all like nice photos, good names, good labels, and stuff like that. It's really interesting how technology allows us all of a sudden to like really use globalization for our personal benefits, which also should scare us a bit, because it's like, what part of my job is actually falling apart? What do people still need me? What I'm actually getting paid for? It's going to be really interesting. I think it's going to change a lot what companies actually hiring us for, because they say, okay, for that stuff you do, I get something much more cheaper from another country, but I need you to focus on that. So I think that's, especially like planning our careers and stuff like that, we really have to think about, so what's actually like the core thing that I can provide that's not so easy to outsource. But the other question is, like, there's a development where you could actually ask, so what I actually need companies for who is just selling me stuff? Because actually I can do a lot of stuff myself in the future, like the maker bots. Yeah, 3D printing of objects has been a really expensive thing. Yeah, before the maker bot, I think the cheapest 3D printer was around 30,000 euros or something like that. Nothing that you ever, as a private person, could afford. Now we have 3D printers starting to get a lot better for under 1,000 euros, which allows me to create little pieces, and they are driven by open source technology. Yeah, there's a huge open source database where I can download schematics for all kinds of objects that are just loaded into the printer that prints me that object. Also the thing with global technology. Yes, someone in Australia can create a schematic, and I in Germany, a few seconds later, can print out that object physical into my physical world. I can highly recommend the book Makers by Cory Doctorow if you want to read up about this whole do-it-yourself maker movement. It's really interesting, near future vision of where this whole movement could go, and what could happen if we actually are able to do our own thing. This whole maker affair, which is a really big trend in the US. I mean, especially in Germany, you always had this Heimwerker, like not movement, but every father on Saturday was listening to soccer results and was working on something. But in the US it's really big. They're really trying to do a lot more creating stuff themselves, and also like really challenging consumerism. That's the whole collaborative consumption trend, what it is about. That actually challenging my idea of I have to buy something new for everything that I need, by actually technology allowing us to see, okay, what do my neighbors have to offer? What do they don't need all the time? What can I borrow from them? Do I have something that I can borrow? Can I lend them? And before that it was really difficult, because I have to go to everyone individually, ask, do you have this? Do you have that? Now there are platforms out there and web portals out there who can make this really easy. So again, technology is really making it easier to turn down or tone down our consumption, which for a brand or for a big company who's trying to sell me something new is really uncomfortable. Or platforms like Etsy that allow a lot of mostly women to sell stuff that they just enjoy creating and making some money with that. And actually some of them making really good money with it. So we as companies, or companies in general, really have to think about what's really the value that can provide in the future that that will add to that and that will not be in competition with that. There's others who taken it to the next level, like the guys from Newspaper Club, with that very nice quote, "We took your business models, now we're coming for your machines." So what the Newspaper Club guys did is actually kind of like writing a print driver for big-ass newspaper printing machines. So you're actually able to create a newspaper with like a couple of pages on your computer, send it to them, and get 5 copies for like 30 euros or something like that. Which, for all kinds of purposes, is really interesting. Completely not possible before. And actually, I, in Germany or in the US, can create my own magazine, send them the data, and they will ship the printed out newspapers to me. The next thing that's really interesting is actually what technology changed so much that it's really, really easy to start something. Like, when Eric Schmidt was asked, what do you fear? What competition keeps you up at night? He said, it's not Microsoft or Apple or one of these big companies, because we are all in the same space. We have our eyes on each other. I know they can really surprise me. What I fear are like 2 completely unknown guys in their garage doing something that I completely didn't expect. And that's the stuff that I'm really afraid of, because it's so easy now. We have services like Google Apps or like GitHub or Amazon's cloud space. For me to start like a web company, it takes a day to just set it up. It takes almost no money, besides like the stuff that feeds me or that pays my rent, to get going. Yeah, it's a completely different scenario, even from 10 years ago, where you have to get tons of venture capital to just buy servers or stuff like that. Super easy now. So competition and new startups and companies getting created overnight. It's going to be a huge factor for the companies. Also can't talk about work without mentioning our own field. Advertising is really interesting at the moment. Advertising, marketing, because we're all really clueless. I mean, if you read like LH and all these industry magazines, one day it's the network agencies who are winning it. Next day it's the media, and next day it's like the small hot shops. But what I find really interesting are like the new guys on the block who are doing really interesting things. And Breakfast and Victor's and Spoils are 2 of the companies who have just been mentioned in the top 5 rankings from Mashable about the most innovative advertising agencies out there. Breakfast are these tinkerers from New York who just have a lot of fun creating physical objects. So for example, for Conan, they created this hot air balloon that flew around New York City, checking into Foursquare and all kinds of spaces, and just creating a lot of attention for Conan's new show. They also created, I'm hoping most of you are familiar with Instagram. For South by Southwest, they created a physical printer that printed pictures that you put on Instagram with a hashtag. So really, they're doing a lot of interesting things from the connection between the virtual and the physical space, like this post-digital space where it's everything is connected. And And Victors and Spoils, if you don't know them, are one of the first major agencies who completely are built on a crowdsourcing model. So they not only work with their internal creatives, but they have a huge network of creatives all around the world. And they say that it's really interesting for them. I saw the founder speak at South by Southwest, and he said, there's this one lady, like a single mother in Serbia, which is a brilliant creative, but there's no chance, because she's a single mother and she has to care for her family, there's not a chance in the world that she's ever going to move to New York or to London or something like that. But with our agency model, she can do what she does from her home and deliver all the results with the help of technology. And Victors and Spoils has a brilliant creative. And they are really experimenting a lot with like the best ways to have meetings and stuff like that, and they're learning a lot. But I think that's really changing. So they, all of a sudden, they have an immense creative talent pool that's not available to all the other agencies who are more like going for the classic model of everyone has to be present. There's so much change in advertising that even like the supposedly big guys of advertising are actually leaving. Like Alex Bogaski, like who was like the guy, the creative guy of Crispin Porter and Bogaski, left last year, and he said, mostly what I want to do is participate in this cultural revolution that's happening, mostly outside of advertising. The more interesting stuff is coming from the fringes, and that's where I want to be. Yeah, so that's the uncomfortable part for us advertising people. The interesting stuff is mostly happening somewhere else, and that used to be different. The question is what we're doing with that. Also this whole social thing, yeah, we always think we got it figured out, but like David Amaro from Middleman Digital says, you see businesses, brands and organizations are truly struggling with the disruptive nature of social technologies. In fact, the term social technologies is part of the problem. We're all fixated on the technologies, and meanwhile the real action lies in harnessing the change brought about by human behavior enabled by technology. So again, technology is making it really difficult for us to really understand what's going behind it. It's changing so much that we're still trying to catch up on understanding what's actually happening out there. So where are we heading? For all that I just mentioned, like how it's changing, it's really a question. So what's work about in the future? And just to give you one thought on your way, that's the classic definition of Peter Drucker. I mean, who could argue with Peter Drucker? The purpose of a business is to create a customer. My old social media boss at Razorfish changed that quote into like a 21st century definition by saying the purpose of a business is to create a customer who creates a customer. So that's where I think the future of work is heading.
Okay, so just like that part on media is changing. Quick question. Okay, I'll start with 3 quotes that I'll just throw out there, and I'll tell you later why. You know who peddles false hopes to the would-be media folks? People who go around implying that media earns so little because our audiences can't be trusted. That once we get this pesky internet thing solved, there will be jam tomorrow for everyone. This guy, Doctorow, sci-fi author, I changed it a little bit. He was talking about artists and the music industry. I think it also holds true for media. Second quote, and I should explain the background picture first, so you know what it's about. Himito is a researcher in Tokyo and at UCLA, I believe, and the picture shows the contents of a bag of a Japanese businessman and how many phones and media devices he's carrying, because there's no device that does all the things he wants to do and doesn't offer the channels he likes to consume his media through. And people are willing to go to extraordinary lengths to piece these experiences together with a complex ensemble of devices and services that aren't optimized yet to meet this demand for personalized media, for maybe segmented media, for customized media, whatever. Third quote, again, Ben Hammersley, one of our speakers at Co-Cities, who we all love to quote. And you'll see probably 5 more quotes.
We have a pro crash. Yeah.
And he talks about what makes his life as a consultant type explainer of the future painful. And he says it's people who won't stare the modern world in the eye and say, right, we're fucked, aren't we? How do we unfuck ourselves? Many media people are being in denial about the world we're living in. I don't know if you can tell that it's like Kim Jong-il looking at corn. Just in case anyone doesn't know the Tumblr, Kim Jong-il is looking at things. You need to check this out. Yeah, so there's a whole industry in denial of what's happening out there, and that may be a problem for us, especially if you work in media or publishing. Quick raise of hands, anyone working in media or publishing here? Any publishers? None of you? Lucky you. Lucky you, like nobody's going to throw stuff at me. I did work in publishing, but only very briefly, luckily. So none of you need to feel uncomfortable, but I'm going to go on anyway. Because there's actually nothing to worry about. Digital disruption, nothing changes, right? You may have seen the traditional publishing bingo, in case you ever have a meeting with a publisher. Who has publishing clients? No? Who is this working for? You may have heard some of the arguments here. We don't pay for books unless we force them. Libraries are different. Books are nothing like music, movies, or software. Cheap books devalue everybody else's work. Wikipedia cannot possibly work. I don't have time for social media. It's all the classics, but at least I hear in meetings all the time. So don't worry about this, because it will stay that way, right? But for every complex problem, there's a solution that is simple, neat, and wrong. And we can find quite a few of those simple, neat, and wrong solutions when we look at everybody's favorite publisher, the New York Times. Whatever their publishers need help, they look for the New York Times because they have everything. They have a fancy logo, they have a social network up there, they have the Twitters and the Facebook, and they do it all. And they also know how to monetize, like with Times Select. I don't know if you remember the first try of the Times paywall about 2005-ish. I tried to get a screenshot of that thing. The first link in Google actually led to a 404-page found on the Times web servers, on their own web server. So I had to take a screenshot of a Reuters thing that basically says, Times Select was discontinued because the Times decided to make most of its website available for free again, in the hopes of attracting more readers and higher advertising revenue, because they tried to make money off hiding their content, and it didn't quite work out. Oops. So they learned something. They iterated quickly. They waited for a few years and then introduced the paywall again, just a few days ago. Only this time it has a somewhat nicer interface. And they are making big bucks compared to what the Wall Street Journal charges or The Economist. It's like how much content costs in relation to the other things, the other platforms, unless you know Google or Twitter or how to use your delete key on the computer. Because they put up a paywall, but they punched so many holes in it that nobody ever will have to pay a cent for the content unless they really try hard to. So again, it was a huge success, or will be a huge success. Probably discontinued in a few months or something. Others have, of course, tried the same, as companies do. The Daily's iPad version is completely hidden behind a paywall. The Wall Street Journal tries to hide the stuff, except that they also want the Google juice, so you can Google the stuff and then still get it in the Times. So they're all trying the paywalls, they're all trying, and they're failing miserably. But there's nothing to worry about, because there's 3 things you need to do, and then you can win in the internet. First, remember, you are the ones who know best how your readers think. You just take any one of those arguments and you'll be fine, right? Second is, make sure not to let anyone get to your content for free, because those pesky readers, they only annoy you. Just like, hide it all behind a paywall and you'll be good. And never ever look outside of your own sphere. And saw a funny presentation on that at the DLD. These huge research labs, and they presented all their own results, which basically said people spend most money on online media if they look exactly like print magazines. And next thing was like the founder of Instapaper and Flipboard and all these like really cool online services out there that make reading online stuff much, much better, that people actually are happy to pay money for if they can. But just don't pay attention to any of those, so just don't worry. And with that, I'll hand back to Jonas.
Yeah, so that just like a quick run through the stuff that's really has us keeps us interested, and that's where a lot of things are changing. And it's a bit tongue in cheek, because the stuff that makes other people uncomfortable is actually, like I mentioned in the beginning, is the stuff that really gets us exciting, like the possibilities. Yeah, like if you I love these apps. Yeah, I don't know about you, but if you have an iPad, Instapaper and Flipboard have completely changed how I consume content. And actually, I'm reading so much more. I'm reading so much more New York Times stuff since I have Instapaper. I'm reading so much more articles and stuff since I'm using Flipboard, because it's really much more how I actually want to consume things. And we just got a presentation of the guys from Wheatmill who are creating an ebook experience that's actually social. I think they're not out yet out of private beta, but that's Wheatmill. I think is going to be one of the services that's really going to sell the idea of ebooks, because with ebooks I finally have the possibility to share everything I'm doing with a book, everything I find interesting, to discuss about certain topics. Or certain quotes in that book right where I am, and can see what others are saying about the same stuff. Like the Kindle has this possibility that I can mark things, that I can, and this very, very unfancy thing where I can just see, oh, this passage was highlighted by 26 people, which is like, okay, yeah, it sounds interesting, but I have no idea who are these people or what I'm talking about. And Wheatmill is really changing that. It's really going to be interesting. So, as we had in the Hammersley quote at the beginning, it's really a lot of strange stuff's happening out there, and it's going to change more dramatically. It's not going back. I really find it interesting, because there's, at the moment, with books from like Nicholas Carr and others who are really like against stuff happening out there with information, like this information overload. I always wonder what are they trying to do, because time never has turned back. Yeah, it's never happened that we were wrong here, so let's cut off the power, go back to only reading books or something. It's always going to evolve, and it's always going to change, and we going to go along with that. And just to finish up this presentation, we want to give you some ideas how we are coping with that change and what we think is a good approach. And the first one is one of our favorite slides for every presentation, where we talk about this kind of stuff that companies really have to learn, which German Musiker Clouseau put in the wonderful words "Panik sieht bescheuert aus," which roughly translate to panicking looks ridiculous. And that's, I mean, if you look at how companies are, like what the New York Times is doing, like really desperately trying to make money off this thing without really knowing what they're doing, it just looks ridiculous. It makes them look ridiculous. And the second thing is, I think it's a really important thing, what again our friend Ben said, the pain isn't from the change, the pain is from the struggling against the change. Yeah, that's where the pain comes from. So how do we actually cope with change? First thing is stay curious. Michael Carney is a serial entrepreneur from New York. He's like the creator of The Feast, a really nice conference, of a new startup called Skillshare. And he says, I can attribute my own success and the success of many of my friends to the fact that we are really curious, trying to soak up as much knowledge as possible. That really resonates well with us. Or designer Michael Wolff, I'm obsessively interested in everything. The second advice that we say is embrace complexity. Again, like this early 20th century author H.L. Mencken, who said, for every complex problem there's a solution that is simple, neat and raw. We have this, a lot of times we have this idea of really trying to like purify and get it to the core and then come up with like the perfect solution for that thing, and we really discard the complexity around things. And I actually think that, like St. Gordon says, embracing complexity is a scarce trade worth acquiring. If I embrace complexity, it's actually a much easier living. If I know that I don't have the possibility to understand everything and that I can say, it's fine, I'm going to try as best as I can, it makes life much easier. And the third advice we would give is tinker away. Because that's actually where a lot of the new stuff is coming from. Stephen Johnson wrote a book about where innovation comes from, and he talked to a lot of people, and he said one recurring theme in almost all the people that I looked at is that they have a lot of hobbies. The innovators are constantly working on 3, 4, or 5 pet projects beyond their main job. So I think that's a really important thing. Yeah, like try out stuff. Yeah, it's the thing that Clay Shirky, who's really well known for his take on the whole like information revolution or information technology revolution, was saying. We are now in the same area that the world was after the invention of the printing press by Gutenberg. It's about 50 years of chaos because the old business models didn't work. There weren't new business models invented yet, so it was chaos. And the only way that we got through that was by trying out everything that's possible. And that's exactly what tinkering away leads at. Let's try out as much as we can. Also, like Dennis Crowley, founder of Foursquare, who said, we didn't sit around a boardroom thinking, here are 10 ideas to build a company. We like building products, and if it became a business, great. So that should be our approach. Like not so much like, okay, is this a business, is this a business, but what do we actually enjoy doing? Yeah, what would we like? What creates fun for us? And out of that can come the best projects. And that's the quote I want to leave you with. That's where the final words of Bruce Sterling with this closing keynote at South by Southwest. That's really like the world we live in and how we should approach it. So yeah, be curious, embrace complexity, and tinker away. Good luck to you. Thank you.